Again, Hurricane Ike up at the top. We do have a little bit of audio, the latest from Houston. But again, looks still very much like a newspaper feel. We do have a few icons down here that show a little bit of multimedia content. So they're trying to get that up on the web, but in terms of a difference, in terms of using the online platform, they're doing a little bit through links here, but not a lot. This is my own newspaper in Daytona Beach, and as a very local newspaper that covers a two-county geographical area, we tend to focus on the local news above the fold, and you can just see the beginnings of a picture of Hurricane Ike here in the middle of the page. Again, looks very much like a newspaper in some senses. We do have some links here to other content, but nothing really jumps out at you in terms of multimedia, online, that this is different than what somebody might find in the traditional newspaper. Now this one's a little bit interesting in that here's CNN, a broadcast entity, and they have video front and center. At the very top of the fold, they have a couple of thumbnails here that you can actually see video content versus an icon telling you, oops, excuse me, a video icon telling you about the video content on the page. So I thought out of all of the ones that we've looked at so far, there was much more of a focus on the medium itself and the ability to use multimedia here. There's also a couple of buttons up here that are interesting as well, video and a button they call iReport. And iReport is CNN's citizen journalism initiative where they're inviting the public to be able to participate in the news gathering process by sharing in the industry what we call user-generated content. Or UGC for a really ugly acronym. And so they're taking this user-generated content, and instead of embedding it in comments and things like that, they're really giving it front and center placement. Let me show you what a little bit below the fold on this looks like, because there was a lot of upper space here devoted to the nameplate there. You can see down here in the Ike story that we just saw a peek on here, we still see a little bit of video. But down on these links here as well, Ike's path, on-the-scene photos and video, AC360. They've got up-to-the-minute blogs from inside Ike. You can sign up for breaking news email alerts. They've got more Ike video of people the next time we're leaving rather than staying on. They've got prominence to their iReport initiative, see images of Ike's aftermath. And then they take you to the CNN Wire where you can get stories from staff, etc. So what they've done is underneath this major story embedded a lot of the social media types of things that we're seeing, as well as some of the citizen journalism initiative, and giving them more prominence than you saw on some of the other newspapers' websites that I showed you. Here, down here in the box here, they've got This Week in iReport, and they give prominence to a particular user's submission to CNN. Okay, so some changes there in how CNN is doing it, but we're still seeing a very slow evolution. Well, what's happening in the news ecology? What's happening that newspapers are responding to or trying to respond to that we see? And here's another visual. Again, it's a little difficult to read some of the words here, but notice that there's no major ball right here in the center that is the news organization. What we're finding is a more distributed news information gathering, sourcing, creating process where people outside the news organization are much more involved in the gathering of news and the presenting of news. We have this role here that we traditionally on the other one called audience, which now has this kind of larger term of community that through user-generated content is engaged in the news gathering process. How many of you have heard of the word crowdsourcing? Okay, why don't you explain it to us?
I guess it means like taking really information you gather from the crowd and using it as a resource.
Exactly. You didn't break down the word, but basically it's using whatever tools you can to cast out a question or a query or or use a poll or some other way to be able to get comment and diverse views on an issue before you start forming your questions to write your article. So you may have some preliminary questions, some preliminary ideas, but you're really using the masses, the crowd, to be able to source your story rather than going to your traditional 3 or 4 or 5 sources that you might use for a news report. And investigative reporting, obviously, that's a little bit more different, but in this particular case, we're using the masses, average Joes, out on the street to be able to help gather information for us and then using that as the basis for our stories. We also have this other new person over here that we didn't see on the other graphic, this beat blogger. Traditionally may have been a reporter, but now maybe somebody in the community who's focusing on a particular issue. For example, the gadfly that might be at the local political town hall meeting, etc., that's always there, that has traditionally been there, questioning and querying and probing the commissioners on what's happening. And now this person, because of the tools that they have available, are actually providing valid and valuable information that perhaps a reporter who was not at the event or a reporter who even was at the event, they're providing supplement to that information in their own blog. We still see somebody called the editor, but there's a larger sense-making function here involved in bringing information from all of these areas together. We still see advertisers still trying to figure out their role in this new ecology. How do they function in an online manner when the metrics for how you gauge audience are still a little fuzzy math there? We have a new role here in the community weaver. And this is a role that I play a lot in my position at Mytopia Cafe, where I'm out in the community drawing stories from the community, talking to the community about what's available, really doing some of the traditional shoe leather kind of work that journalists used to do, being out in the community and talking to people and finding out what's important to them. And so there's a lot of work here between the community and this community weaver, brokering, moving beyond even information, but brokering conversations and brokering interests within the community. One example of this is some of the work that I've done on Mytopia Cafe as a liaison, a partner with a nonprofit group in our community of about 90 nonprofits that provide all different kinds of community services to our community. They produce a data report. And they have this data report, they have the information on their website, but it really hadn't gotten any farther than that. And I said, what if we took this data report and had some students in a similar public affairs class take the data that's in here and create some stories around them. But not only create the stories, but go out and find a human face and use some digital storytelling skills to tell the stories of the individuals affected by this story. And then what if they go online and use our forums and blogs and other tools to engage the audience in some crowdsourcing, in some problem solving, and engage them in some dialogue on what's happening on those issues and what solutions they've seen or found that have worked in places that they've lived. And so I went to one of the local universities and pitched this project to their class, and so their class is going to be engaged in that project this semester. Where I, as the community weaver, I'm not necessarily doing the project, but I'm providing the tools and the ideas and brokering the entities to be able to get something done that's a journalistic project, but in a different way that involves the community and involves some of our young people in sourcing and creating that information. And then there's another new person on the scene here as well, this information architect or programmer that's involved and very involved in helping to take some of the new tools and make them work to not only inform, but to engage and to move people towards action on some of these issues. So to try and use the technologies and the tools to deepen people's understanding of the issues that they're dealing with. Now in this particular graphic, it's an evolving graphic, and so even at the conference that I went to where we looked at this, we came up with some additional roles that weren't on there and some other people that might be involved in this process. But what's changed in those two pictures? There's a couple of key fundamental things. When your farmer audience has the same tools as you to publish, publishing isn't your unique selling point. when they have access to the same information. News gathering isn't your unique selling point.